Welcome. I'm Dr. Ann Shantz, and with me tonight is Elizabeth, my faithful colleague and assistant, and you will probably get emails from her and announcements from her as well as from me. And tonight we're going to learn about some really simple anxiety relief techniques so that you can calm your anxiety in the moment. You can do some practices that will manage anxiety in the more long term. But first, we'll do some work on understanding what anxiety actually is. Elizabeth, do you have something you'd like to add?
These techniques have helped me maintain a cool and centered in the midst of chaos. But the important thing is to practice them. That way, they can come up at the drop of a hat when things start going crazy.
That's a good point. Nothing works very well if you don't use it. The obvious is sometimes necessary. Anyway, here we go. So here's what we'll be talking about. First, we'll talk about understanding anxiety, what it is, what the physiology of fear is, and a little bit, not very much, about anxiety disorders. Because if you actually have an anxiety disorder, you need professional help. These techniques will help you, but with anxiety disorders, you need to seek professional help. The second part of the training will be the actual techniques, and they're set in different groupings so that you can go and choose the ones that look most interesting to you. But we'll go through all of them and give you examples of how to practice them, and hopefully you'll be ready to do them on your own. If you do have questions, feel free to email me, Ann at AnnShantzPhD.com or Beth at AnnShantzPhD.com if you have questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. What is anxiety? Anxiety is what happens when your thoughts hijack your natural fear response system, setting off your fight, flight, or freeze reactions. And breathing is the quickest antidote. It may seem strange that breathing is the antidote, but if you're like me, I hold my breath when I'm in pain. I hold my breath when I'm anxious. And most people with anxiety issues are shallow breathers, and they breathe through their mouth. So what we want to do is close your mouth, breathe through your nose, and breathe deeply and slowly anytime you start to feel anxious. But the important part here is that anxiety is about your thoughts. You thought it was an emotion, but it's actually your thoughts. Okay, everyone just take a deep breath and notice how it feels to breathe. Calm breathing helps to reset the pace at which your heart is beating too. So breathing is extremely powerful. Just take a deep breath and it will help calm you immediately. Now, fear, which we're all familiar with, actually is an emotion, and it actually is happening now. Fear is not something in the past. Fear is not something in the future. Fear is something happening now. Anxiety, on the other hand, is thinking. Everyone thinks, everyone believes that it is an emotion, but it's actually overthinking, and it's stuck either in the past, and we call that guilt, or overthinking in the future, we call that worry. So these are types of anxiety that everyone can suffer from. Are you dreading something that's coming? Are you ruminating on something that you might have done wrong in the past? Those are both anxieties, but it is your thinking starts to activate your fear emotion. Anxiety is a form of thinking. Worry is future-oriented. Guilt is past-oriented. And it's linked to your fear responses via your imagination. Because what's happened in the past is already over. It's only in your imagination now. What's coming in the future is certainly your imagination because it isn't even here yet. So is worrying good or bad? Yes, it's both. Healthy and adaptive anxiety, worry thinking is an aid to imagine and prepare for future danger by acting in the present. So when you realize that if you're worried about something, there should be something to do in the present, you do that thing, you're motivated to act on this thing right now, and you do the activity. For example, I need to pay a bill. Oh, I need to pay the electric bill. Pay my electric bill, worry gone. Don't have to worry about it anymore. I did the action in the present. I wrote my check, send it off.
So worry is really, oh my gosh. So worry is really the way that your mind tells you to do something, that there's probably something you need to do.
I need to do now to prevent something in the future. I don't want my electricity turned off, so I need to pay my bill now. Yes, good worry. Great worry. Helps to remind me. Unhealthy worry, on the other hand, destroys your performance because you're so busy off in the future that you can't do anything in the present, or you do it with half your mind because the rest of it's off in the future somewhere worrying. It's detrimental to all life functioning because you're not present. Present means in the present. And it can be chronic and completely debilitating. People are very forgetful. They don't notice things that are going on around them. It damages relationships because you're not present. So worry, when it goes beyond just reminding you to do something, is not healthy. If there's nothing to do in the present, then worry is counterproductive.
So when you find yourself worrying about something, if you can't do it right now,
I can't do anything now.
Right, about it.
Then I need to refocus on something else because that worry is just wasting my energy.
Ah, interesting.
How much worry does it take to change the future? So if I worry hard enough, then my child will get an A on the test, right? I don't think so. But that's the way we behave. We behave as if I worry long enough, then I'll prevent something from happening in the future. If I suffer enough now, this thing won't happen. It's just not true. And we know.
But aren't you just, isn't worry just trying to figure out and solve a problem? If I pick at it and worry at it, maybe a solution will come up?
Not very likely, unless there's something that you need to do now. Worry isn't considering or brainstorming. It's dreading something that's coming in the future. It isn't the same as coming up with alternative solutions. It's just being anxious about something that may or may not ever come. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes.
The same with guilt. Is it good or bad? Well, both. Guilt can be your conscience. Guilt notifies you that you've done something that makes you feel bad. So it motivates you to change your behavior, to notice and to change. And then it improves your performance in the future. So once you notice that something you're doing has made you feel bad, you decide not to do it in the future, and you've learned your lesson. You take the lesson and leave the guilt. You don't carry on the guilt. There's nothing useful about feeling guilty about something from which you've already learned your lesson. Feeling guilty about things that are in the past, you can't change them, and just piling guilt on yourself is not going to do anything but destroy your self-esteem, and again, detrimental to your life functioning because you're just all tied up in knots worrying about everything that you've done wrong ever in your life. And again, chronic and debilitating because it divides you. It keeps you from being in the present. You're in the past worrying about things you can't do anything about. So if you're feeling guilty, figure out what it is. What did you do that made you feel bad? How can I change it? How can I change the behavior, the thing that I did? And make up your mind to change it. If you can make amends, if you can go and apologize or do something, by all means, do that. But then you're finished. Guilt done. Served its purpose. How much guilt does it take to change the past? Well, my goodness, wouldn't that be nice?
Yes.
Can't get there from here. The physiology of fear. Fear and stress are the same physiologically. So as you get stressed and become fearful of something that's going to happen in the future, my goodness, that little guy's suffering over here. It starts as soon as the stressor is perceived by the senses. And then the senses alert the brain, which signals the autonomic nervous system, which is separate from the central nervous system, which initiates all kinds of physiological cycles to protect you by activating organ, muscle, hormones responses that are all needed to gear up to either run or fight or freeze.
So by seeing, like if I'm walking through the woods and I see up ahead a snake, that's going to kick in my fear response, and my body starts turning on in order to do something. Fight,
That's
flight,
right. It'll turn on all the systems to activate your muscles and your breathing and get you all ready to run or fight. And by the way, if you get closer and you notice that that was a stick, you're still activated and you're still stressed because your mind can't tell the difference between whether it's real or misperceived. As soon as you have the notion in your head, as soon as your brain has decided it's a snake, off to the races. The autonomic nervous system controls the involuntary actions of your organs, glands, and blood vessels. Sympathetic nervous system is the action system. It's the one that makes you get going. Go, strengthen. Parasympathetic is the relaxation system, and it puts your body into a healing mode and relaxing mode. The impact of chronic fight or flight. If you think about all of the different diseases that we have that are chronic now, most of them can be traced back to chronic stress and chronic anxiety. Because as the autonomic nervous system activates, your blood pressure goes up, your stress hormones go up, sticky blood platelets go up. Meanwhile, your digestive system, immune system, growth and sex hormones all go down because you don't need those until this crisis is over. So they go offline while all these other things go up. So of course you're going to have heart disease. You've got all of this stuff going on over here, and you're going to have ulcers. There's your digestive system isn't working. It's offline. Weight gain, your digestive system and your hormones are out of balance. Infertility, all sorts of things are associated with these systems that go offline when your autonomic nervous system is active, or when you're in your fight or flight mode.
It's kind of interesting. I noticed as a massage therapist that when we are stressed, that we can get sick easier, and maybe even it brings it on because we're stressed. I'm eating more sugar, which is an inflammatory. I'm drinking alcohol, things that really are not healthy for me, which then lowers my immune system. But because I'm in chronic stress, it's going to turn off, because everything, when you're in flight or flight mode, your body takes offline those things that you don't need in order to fight, flight, or freeze. So that's kind of turned off. And then everything that we do need, blood pressure, stress hormones, sticky blood platelets, in order to move, turn on and ramp up. So it's very interesting. When I'm around my sick grandson, I try to make sure I eat healthy and I stay in a lower stress because I don't want to get sick. He's just a germ magnet.
So the sympathetic response is the action response. It enhances the strength of your skeletal muscles. Chronic muscle tension could be what you get as a result of having this activated too much. It increases the heart rate. You have rapid heartbeat, palpitations, raises blood pressure, increased sugar and fat levels in the blood. You could get dizzy, you could get shaky, you could get trembling, especially after the episode, because it's going to get all of that is going to provoke your insulin levels to go up, which is then going to leave you dizzy, shaky, and trembling later. It enhances your mental activity, intense focus, but it's very channeled. It's a tunnel vision on the fear or the threat, so that if you're constantly and chronically activated, it's going to be really hard for you to focus on the things you need to do, because you're tunnel visioned into one thing at a time, and it's just not the best way to be present and functioning at your best. Decreases intestinal movement. So by that, you don't want to have a bowel movement in the middle of having to run or fight. So your bowel movement, the motility stops. So if you're chronically constipated, it could have something to do with you being chronically stressed. It limits your digestive secretion. So again, you're not going to be digesting your food fully. You're going to have all sorts of different kinds of gastrointestinal problems. It constricts the peripheral blood vessels. So cold or sweaty hands and feet, you're going to have those things. You may even start to have neuropathy issues. Neuropathy meaning numbness and tingling. Dilates the pupils, and when the pupils are dilated, more light gets in, which ultimately can damage your retina and damage parts of your eye, making your vision worse. So it's great when you need it. You need it desperately because you've got to protect yourself. But the things that we evolve to fight are not what we get stressed over now. We evolved to fight a discrete enemy, for example, a tiger jumping out at you, or some wolf showing up at your fire. Those are discrete things. It happens, action's taken, and it's over. But what we're stressed about these days are chronic. Can I pay my bills? Will I be able to buy a house? Will I be able to maintain my house? Will my children get into college? All of these things never let go. They're there all the time. And that's not what the sympathetic response was designed for. It was designed for an immediate threat and a response. And that's not what we do now. We have not had time to change our evolution, but we've got to be able to control this sympathetic response. That's why we need these anxiety relief techniques to get ourselves out of this sympathetic response and into the parasympathetic response.
It's too bad we can't be more like a dog or a rabbit. You know, they get all they race across the street, barely missing the car, and they don't go on the other side and sit there, go, oh my gosh, I almost was killed. They just go, oh, phew, and then off they go. Everything turns off, they're fine, and they go.
Yep.
I need one of those buttons.
Yeah, well, that's what we're trying to teach you, is how to do that, so that you let it go and move on. Now, the physiology of fear, and this is going to be crucial, because this is where the difference between fear and anxiety is going to be. Fear begins with a sensory experience in the now. Something happens that causes my nervous system to wake up, become alert, notify my brain, where my brain assigns a meaning to whether this is safe or dangerous, which then signals the autonomic nervous system, which ramps up the organs and the hormones, and then goes back to the sensory experience to say, okay, what do we need to do? And then this process just runs and runs and runs until the thing is over. But as we just discussed, the thing doesn't end. So you just keep getting more and more and more and more stressed, as long as you're keeping the same event in mind. And here's anxiety, worry, guilt, stress response starts when the stressor is imagined. Oh, let's see. My boss could come in here in a minute and fire me. That hadn't happened. My boss isn't anywhere around. I have no reason to think my boss is going to fire me, but for some reason I started imagining that my boss is going to walk in here and fire me. Okay, so I've imagined it, and my autonomic nervous system cannot tell the difference between what I imagined and what happened. So if I imagine it and my brain labels it scary and frightening, it alerts my autonomic nervous system. It signals the organs and the hormone responses. And then here we are. I'm in the same mode, but nothing actually happened. But I'm still in the same stress mode. And if I stay here, I could end up in panic attacks. If I stay here, I could end up physically sick. So I really need to figure out how to get out of this stress mode and into relaxation. Here's where we start. We start over here in the brain when it's anxiety. So it's an imagined event, but it's interpreted as if it's happening. Goes to the autonomic nervous system, the organs and sensory experience. Now I'm sensing what's going on in my body, and my autonomic nervous system has activated. My heartbeat's going. Oh my goodness, I'm breathing shallowly and I'm getting more and more nervous. Oh my gosh, it's worse. Oh, it's getting worse and worse and worse. So I go and I escalate it even more, and nothing ever happened. It was my imagination. That's what anxiety does for you. It is definitely not your friend. So several things that we're going to teach you how to do. One of them is going to be where you focus. You don't focus on these imagined bad events. If you start doing that, you move your focus so that you don't keep this escalation going. But focus is one of the most powerful things that you have, aside from breathing, to change your anxiety levels. Anxiety disorders are chronic, they're debilitating, and they are an escalating activation of this stress response system. But it's to the point where you're not able to carry on your regular daily functions. That's when we talk. Any disorder has to, one of the diagnostic features has to be that it interferes with daily life to the degree that you have to do something. So normal anxiety is acute, it's episodic, motivating force to get things done, like study, pay bills. Anxiety that is just a little bit of pressure to do things, that's normal. But anxiety that just doesn't stop is entirely different.
So acute is just generally defined as 24, 48 hours, and chronic is anything past that.
Well, acute with anxiety is probably even less than that. It's probably more like, how long does it take for me to study for a test? I'm anxious about my test, so I'm going to study for an evening before or a day before. Pay my bills. That isn't going to take me 2 days to pay my bills, I hope. That's a lot of bills.
Yeah.
And so it's more like pressure to get a task that may not be something you want to do completed because you have a deadline. It's usually associated with deadlines.
Okay.
That makes it acute. Whereas if there's no deadline, or it's a repeating thing that you're anxious about all the time, then you could have normal anxiety. Could be relatively chronic, but it can't be to the point that it interferes with your life and your life function. Then it becomes a disorder.
Like not getting out of bed, or symptoms.
Or you're too scared to go out of the house. You know,
Okay.
you're too scared to go take care of your business. You won't go to the grocery store because you're afraid of COVID, or to be very topical. A lot of people for a long time wouldn't go to the grocery store because they're afraid of COVID. Wouldn't go out of the house. Wouldn't go here. Wouldn't go there. Social anxiety. People, you get terrified that everybody's judging you, and you're afraid to go talk to anybody about anything. So the next section is the actual techniques that we're going to be going over, and we'll get to that shortly.